March 4th, 1970, began like any other Wednesday. As people emerged from their homes, they anticipated the usual routine of midweek chores and work. The air was fresh, carrying the promise of spring just around the corner. Winter had been fairly tame, letting up its harsh grip gradually. By lunchtime, however, Britain found itself engulfed in a snowstorm of epic proportions. The snow was so relentless and unexpected that miners found themselves trapped underground, and trains struggled to make their way to London, arriving a staggering 8 hours behind schedule. This was no ordinary blizzard. It was a meteorological event that slipped entirely under the radar of the Met Office, much to the ire of Parliament, which demanded answers. For half a day, snow pummeled the land with such intensity that the East Midlands experienced weather not seen since the notorious winter of 1947. Near Northampton, immense snow drifts piled up to nearly 48 centimetres high. Power lines in Kent collapsed under the weight of the snow, while a staggering 688 miners were left waiting helplessly in pitch darkness, trapped underground as they awaited rescue from the electrical failure. This is the tale of a blizzard lost to time, the snowstorm that ambushed Britain shamefully unprepared, leaving the public fuming at the forecasters who failed to anticipate it. The British winter of 1970 had been neither particularly harsh nor exceptionally mild. February saw bouts of cold, with light snow that barely set tongues wagging. Come March, people were in full bloom with spring fever, preparing to embrace the promise of longer days and rising temperatures. Daffodils tentatively stretched towards the sun, children donned lighter jackets in lieu of scarves, homes were aired in an annual renewal of spring cleaning, and the washing lines became an emblem of the changing season. Conversations amongst men conspired whether it was time to put away the snow shovels. Then, in a sudden and unanticipated twist, the weather made an about-face. On March 3rd, frigid winds descended from Scandinavia, channeling Arctic chills southward across the nation. A low-pressure system stealthily tracked through the country, oblivious to all. The Met Office, in its forecast for March 4th, warned only of the occasional flurry, light snow here and there, perhaps a smattering of sleet, the sort of forecast that prompts one to grab an umbrella rather than seek shelter from the storm or hoard provisions. Catastrophically misjudged, their predictions failed entirely to encompass what was in store. Snow began its quiet descent in the early morning hours across southern England, the East Midlands, and Wales. Initially, it was innocuous, a few swirling flakes, nothing substantial. Morning commuters paid little mind as they ventured to work, and children fancied it might settle thick enough for a playtime snowball fight. But then, as the morning progressed, the clouds seemed to rupture in earnest. Snow poured from the sky, thick and furious, propelled by icy gusts that swiftly enveloped everything in a blinding white blanket. Visibility plummeted. You couldn't see beyond 10 feet. Office workers peered through their windows as the world outside faded into a ghostly nullity. Shopkeepers clustered in doorways, arms crossed, helplessly observing as the storm laid waste to normalcy. Within mere hours, roads vanished from sight, railways ground to a tragic halt, and Britain, blindsided and unprepared, staggered under the storm's crushing weight. The East Midlands bore the brunt of it all. Northamptonshire and Bedfordshire were consumed by an unending sea of white, some areas layered with snow reaching depths of 40 centimetres. In the vicinity of Northampton, drifts soared to a remarkable 48 centimetres, eclipsing the snowfall total of many entire winters. For an uninterrupted span of 12 relentless hours, the snow showed no sign of stopping. The heavens seemed to open wide, relentlessly pouring out a thick, heavy blanket of snowflakes that enveloped and obscured everything in its relentless path. Not a single pause was granted, no moments of reprieve appeared. It was as though nature had chosen to erase the familiar landscape beneath swathes of pristine white. Roads, once bustling arteries of movement, were rendered completely impassable, transforming into silent, snow-laden corridors. Villages found themselves in sudden isolation, their connection to the outside world severed by the sheer volume of snow. For any unfortunate soul caught outdoors, the brutal reality quickly set in. This was no ordinary snowfall. In fact, it was a powerful force of nature that demanded respect and caution. Farmers, initially setting out with determination to check on their livestock, soon faced the futility of their efforts. Midway across snow-cloaked fields, their resolve was tested as the snow rose alarmingly up to their knees, forcing a retreat back to the haven of warmth and safety. Postal workers, who day in and day out braved the elements to deliver mail, found the circumstances too treacherous. They reluctantly abandoned their routes. Bicycles, typically leaned casually against inviting walls for a brief respite, remained forlorn and untouched, their owners forced to concede to the blizzard's might. No daily routine was spared. Milkmen found their morning rounds disrupted, as the iconic glass milk bottles, innocently waiting on doorsteps, gradually disappeared beneath ever-thickening mounds of snow. It was as if time had paused, with the frozen white replacing familiar signs of life. The comparison drawn to the notorious winter of 1947 was by no means an exaggeration. That winter had carved itself indelibly into the collective British consciousness as an era of extreme hardship and enduring cold. Therefore, for the northern regions and East Midlands of England to experience a similar onslaught in March of 1970 was both extraordinary and deeply unsettling. Those who had endured the bitter freeze of 1947 stood once again at their windows, watching in disbelief as they murmured a fervent wish never to endure such conditions again. Near the town of Bedford, a remarkable 36 centimetres of level snow had accumulated in just 24 hours. This wasn't the result of drifts shaped by the wind, but rather an even layer of snow, a testament to the severity of the storm that had unfolded. The situation was something out of a winter's worst nightmare, where snow didn't just glaze the ground but commanded the landscape and brought areas to a near standstill. Kent bore the brunt of the storm, facing intense challenges as the blizzard unleashed its fury. Power lines sagged under the burden of thick snow and gusty winds, collapsing under the pressure. The fall of each line was dramatic. Snapping sounds pierced the air, and in the distance, sparks flew ominously. It was a domino effect of darkness, cutting off electricity to numerous homes and businesses in its path. Families huddled together in dimly lit rooms, rummaging through drawers and cupboards for candles to fight the encroaching darkness. They donned extra layers, preparing for what might be a long, cold wait, while silently pondering how long this state of disarray would claim their lives. Beneath the earth, in the confines of the Kent mines, a different struggle unfolded. Hundreds of miners, a striking 688 in number, were rendered immobile as the failure of power halted the lift winches. Trapped deep underground, the absence of power translated to no escape route, no way up to the surface. Silence permeated the space where the once familiar clattering of machinery now lay dormant. The atmosphere was punctuated only by the murmur of men's voices, a choir of resilience in the vast darkness. Despite not being in immediate peril thanks to emergency lighting and well-practiced safety protocols, the moment stretched infinitely. Cigarettes glowed dimly amidst the shadows, and flasks of tea became communal lifelines. Their warmth was comforting. In the glow of torches, card games sparked small pockets of cheer, while conversations turned to what lay beyond the surface and whether their loved ones knew of their safety. The young miners masked their nerves with bravado, and their seasoned counterparts retold tales, their narratives steady and soothing. This was the essence of their work, confronting and overcoming whatever lay before them. Meanwhile, rescue teams raced against time, maneuvering generators into position and patching together enough power to restart the lifts that were the miners' exit ticket back to the world above. One by one, every miner emerged to a landscape transformed, a vision in white with snowflakes still swirling around them. This ordeal left an indelible impression, a near-miss event that symbolized a colossal oversight in forecasting. As if orchestrating their own chaos, British Railways experienced a parallel fiasco. Instead of arriving at their bustling destinations in London by morning light, trains found themselves entangled in formidable snowdrifts of the Midlands, creeping ever so slowly, forcing passengers into uncomfortable suspense for close to 8 grueling hours. Inside the cold carriages, passengers shivered, anticipating movement that hesitated indefinitely. Snow built its own barriers against the windows, while the feeble train heating system struggled to assert itself. Frustration manifested as cigarette smoke hung thick in the air, and the corridors became tiring tracks as passengers paced in futile hopes of glimpses outside. Ties to obligations unraveled, businessmen felt the distant pangs of missed opportunities, and mothers stressed over children left waiting at school, uncollected. Delays were not just numerical inconveniences, they expanded exponentially from 3 to 5, even 8-hour stories of disrupted plans. In defeat, some trains abandoned their routes, succumbing to the blanket of snow. Station platforms became congregated hubs of exasperation, filled with commuters gripping newspapers, escaping into the solace of cigarette breaks, querying for information that even staff could not provide. The cold and fatigue were universal sentiments, simmering alongside questions of accountability over a storm that took many by surprise. One harrowed traveller recounted the experience of reaching King's Cross long after dark, a journey that should have spanned a couple of hours stretching agonizingly close to 10, an unwelcome testament to the storm's overpowerings. The moment of stepping onto the platform offered a brief sense of relief, yet it was quickly overshadowed by a growing fury. This was not just any ordinary day disrupted. Appointments were missed, agendas thrown into disarray, and a pervasive sense of chaos took hold. Across the expanse of southern England, this narrative played out with relentless consistency. Buses, once following their usual routes, were suddenly abandoned midway, their drivers radioing dejectedly that continuing was simply not an option. Cars found themselves stranded and buried in the thick snow, their bonnets lost under the relentless white blanket, with only the rescue efforts of farmers and their sturdy tractors promising an escape. Postal vans, typically unwavering in their commitment to deliver, were forced to concede to the weather's indomitable will, retreating to their depots with loads still untouched. Those adventurous or perhaps naive enough to brave the outdoors on foot were met with the harsh realization that March snow, propelled by fierce Arctic winds, was far from the gentle flurries of a quaint winter evening. The biting cold numbed faces, sneaking through even the most diligent layers of clothing, reshaping familiar streets into alien landscapes. The backlash was swift and unequivocal, originating from the highest echelons of power. Upon Parliament's return amidst the fallout, the Met Office found itself at the centre of a storm of its own, facing intense scrutiny. Questions rang out sharply, demanding explanations. How had such a significant snowstorm caught so much of England off guard? The criticism was not only sharp but very much public, as members of Parliament sought immediate answers. Anger was echoed in letters from constituents, equally in shock and distress, and businesses reeled from financial losses that escalated into the thousands. The demand for accountability was loud and clear, the repercussions of the unpredictable weather event rippling through every facet of life. The transport system crumbled entirely under the unexpected onslaught of a severe snowstorm, a catastrophe that might have been averted with adequate warning. The Met Office attempted to justify the oversight, explaining that the low-pressure system intensified and veered off its predicted course much faster than models had anticipated. This northerly wind pattern carried with it an unexpected volume of moisture, resulting in snow that fell much heavier and persisted much longer than anyone had ever imagined possible for early March. These reasons, however, rang hollow to those helplessly stranded for hours on trains, trapped in their remote villages, or left shivering in homes without electricity. On March 4, 1970, the Met Office's failure was stark and complete. It wasn't just the erroneous forecast, it was the timing of it all. March was expected to herald the arrival of spring, and people had lowered their guards. Emergency supplies for March were unheard of. No one had kept extra coal on hand. When the blizzard struck, utterly without warning, the sheer lack of preparedness turned the situation from dire to disastrous. Elderly individuals, who had meticulously rationed their fuel reserves through the harsh months of January and February, suddenly found themselves woefully unprepared. Mothers with young children faced the impossible task of reaching shops for essentials like milk or bread. Entire villages, hemmed in by deep snowdrifts, had no means to call for assistance. The dual blow of downed telephone lines and power outages left them isolated. Although the snow ceased its relentless fall on the evening of March 4th, a full 12 hours after it had begun its assault, the devastation it left behind didn't dissipate. Instead, frigid northerly winds ensured that temperatures plunged well below freezing, reaching lows of -15 degrees in some areas. For over a week, the heavy blanket of snow remained stubbornly in place. Villages continued to be cut off, roads stubbornly blocked. Britain, accustomed to the dull drizzle typical of March, found itself draped in a breathtakingly harsh white landscape, sharply defined beneath brilliant blue skies and the deceptive warmth of sunshine. The weather following the blizzard could be considered a cruel irony. The crystal-clear skies and bright sunshine turned snowfields into dazzling landscapes, stretching in glistening white expanses as far as the eye could see. For children, confined indoors during the severe weather, it was an irresistible winter playground. They eagerly embraced the chance to play, building snowmen and sliding down hillsides on improvised sleds fashioned from tea trays. However, for those grappling with the harsh reality, the aftermath was as draining as the blizzard itself. Farmers found themselves unable to reach their livestock. Deliveries remained stalled. The elderly faced dwindling stocks of food and fuel. Emergency services, stretched to their limits, worked tirelessly, focusing their efforts on aiding the most vulnerable and laboring to restore some semblance of normality. Communities pulled together in acts of solidarity. Neighbors lent helping hands. Men armed with shovels dug paths to homes where the elderly or infirm resided. Women shared their limited provisions of bread and milk. A shopkeeper in a Bedfordshire village exemplified commendable spirit by opening his store despite halted deliveries, choosing to sell whatever remained at typical prices when he could have doubled them. Gradually, Albeit reluctantly, the snow surrendered to the increasing temperatures. As the mercury crept above freezing, the imposing drifts began to diminish, and roads tentatively re-emerged from beneath the snow's tight grip, with stark black tarmac piercing through the blanket of white. Life in southern England began its slow return to normalcy. The experience of March 1970 imparted a harsh lesson to Britain. The onset of spring was not a foolproof shield against turmoil, where the forecasts were not infallible, and 12 hours of unremitting snow could effectively incapacitate half a nation. The blizzard of 1970, unforeseen and sweeping, remains etched in the memories of all who endured its wrath. Do you recall the events of that unforgettable day? We invite you to share your personal experiences in the comments section below. Were you one of the many commuters left stranded on those delayed